A newlywed couple become victims of a deadly break-in.
What's happened, ma'am? I'm shot.
He was lying in bed, on his back, face up, a gunshot wound to his forehead.
There was a lot of blood, brain matter on the headboard of the bed. She'd been shot in the left shoulder.
The investigation reveals this murder is not what it appears on the surface.
The gun that was found, that was actually his gun.
It seemed odd that somebody would have potentially broken into this home and then shot him with his own firearm.
And when new evidence emerges, it leads detectives to a killer who'd go to any lengths to exact her revenge.
They would gamble and they would drink and they would have a big time.
There were women involved, obviously. It happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas.
Was very much manipulating and abusing her.
Just a little target practice here. Just let me see if my aim's on. And I'm like, don't ever point a gun at anybody. Ever.
It's just before dawn on July 12, 2016, when dispatchers in Charlotte, North Carolina receive a frantic 911 call.
What's happened, ma'am? Shot. I've been shot.
The woman identifies herself as Kimberly Reps and says she and her husband were just attacked by an unidentified man.
Okay, are the people who shot you still in the house? I've got people on the way, ma'am.
I wasn't very far from the address, so I waited for another deputy.
We went to the front door, looking for anybody that's out there, any disturbances, anything out of place or suspicious. Couldn't get anybody at the door at that point.
As they approached the back door of the residence, it was ajar. However, there were no signs of forced entry, and they made their way into the home.
Inside the home, sheriff's deputies find Kimberly on the floor bleeding.
She had a gunshot to her left shoulder. She was moaning for help.
Kimberly Reps told them there had been an intruder that had caused her to wake up upstairs in her bed where she was lying with her husband, Rob Reps. She had reached up and grabbed the intruder, who then shot her. She said the intruder left. She had slid out of the bed. Rob looked like he was lying in bed sleeping, but she could not tell if he was all right or not.
After ensuring Kimberly is in no immediate danger, the deputies secure the rest of the house so paramedics can enter as well.
Myself and another deputy started clearing the upper part of the house. And we noticed on the way up, there was blood on the steps, blood on the wall from Miss Reps. It looked like she was bracing herself on the way down. And then we get up to the top stairs and start room by room. We got to the master bedroom. That's when we found the victim.
Her husband was laying in bed with a gunshot to his head. His head was laying on the pillow.
There was a lot of blood, brain matter, skull pieces on the headboard of the bed.
Rob was still alive, but was struggling. He was agonal breathing, which means that it was ineffective in delivering the appropriate amount of oxygen to his body to survive.
With the shooter nowhere to be found, the deputies immediately call in the waiting paramedics.
Kim was transported to the hospital, as well as Robert. Robert was transported to a helipad to be flown to Charlotte, but when he got to the helipad, he was pronounced dead.
you don't know who these people are. You don't know their history. You don't know if they were targeted or if it was random, if somebody was there to go through the house or if they were there to shoot the 2 victims.
To a tragic end when he was still a young boy.
His mom passed away when he was 10 of cancer, and it affected him greatly. I think because he lost his mother so young, he needed to feel loved, and he needed everybody to love him.
People, even if they didn't meet him but once or twice, they remembered him. He was fun. He liked to make people laugh. I remember when first time I met him, we kind of hit it off. He was my daughter's boyfriend. We fell in love with him right off.
After graduating from college, Rob's passion for helping others led him to a career in prosthetics, making artificial limbs for those in need.
When people lose a limb, they have trouble walking, a part of their life is gone, and he enjoyed giving that back.
He was generous. He was generous to a fault sometimes, I think.
Rob went above and beyond for everybody, not just patients, friends, family, everybody.
Rob's work paid extremely well, but what he wanted most was a partner to share it with. In 1991, he married a woman named Sue, and they had 2 daughters together.
She is a nurse. He was a prosthetist, so they did a lot of working together and a lot of living together, and sometimes it's just too much.
After they divorced, Rob committed to another long-term relationship with Lynn Roberts.
He and I worked together. I did billing, he did the same thing, orthotic prosthetics. We got close quickly, and I moved in rather quickly.
But after 13 years, they too parted ways.
Our relationship got bad because Rob became more attentive to a friend of his than he was to me, and I felt left out. And so I needed a break. We did talk about getting back together, but not about when or how that would happen.
Lasting love did not seem to be in the cards for Rob until he met Kimberly Polk.
Kim was very outgoing. She was athletic and smart. She was always, very friendly and sweet.
Kimberly and I are twin sisters. We were born in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were the 6th and 7th child. Growing up, our mom and dad did the best they could to provide for us. It was always a struggle financially, but we were loved.
Like Rob, Kimberly had her share of failed relationships. She'd been married twice and had 2 children. Kimberly maintained a good relationship with her first husband, but her second did not end on good terms.
Kimberly and David's relationship, I believe, was pretty toxic from the beginning.
He was very manipulative with Kimberly. In the end, we're all trying to pull her out of this. And she's finally opening her eyes that this is not normal. You don't have to live this way.
When she decided to start dating again, Rob Reps was a pleasant surprise.
She said, I went on a dating site.
I think they talked on the phone for a while, And one night, a few hours, agreed to meet the next day. And that was the start of that relationship. She fell very quickly for Rob. He made her feel like she was his angel. She was the one he had been looking for.
In his 50s, Rob seemed to have everything: a lucrative and satisfying career and the perfect romantic partner.
Rob kept telling Kimberly, well, if we're gonna get married anyway, let's just do it. Let's just go to the courthouse and do it.
Now, after 6 months of marriage, Robert Reps has been found dead after an apparent break-in that left Kimberly wounded as well.
We secured the scene. We really started digging into evidence and things around the house.
One of the things the officers had noticed was a handgun laying in the floor. They marked it as evidence. Also, when EMS was removing Mr. Reps, another officer noticed a casing in the bedding and noticed a hole in the mattress. During CSI's initial investigation, they swabbed for DNA, they dusted for fingerprints. They processed the scene as a whole, looking for every piece of minute evidence.
Responding to a home invasion, we are looking for different things like, was someone robbed? Were they looking for something in particular?
There were a number of valuable items that were in plain view lying around the house, the types of things that a robber or robbers would have been interested in stealing. Things like computers and, guns.
Nothing had been touched. Nothing appeared to have been ransacked. There were no signs of forced entry or exit point of this home. This was not a home invasion, robbery, burglary, or something along those lines gone wrong. It was somebody coming in purposefully to shoot and kill Rob and or Kimberly.
Coming up, investigators dig into Rob's past for potential suspects.
Several members of the family had mentioned an ex-girlfriend.
And their only eyewitness fights for survival.
Her blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Whatever they had given her was causing the overdose.
Just hours into the investigation of Robert Reps' July 2016 murder, the crime scene is suggesting a personal motive.
The entire community was shocked. Violent crime is not something common in this area, in Union County.
Detectives visit the hospital in the hopes of getting more information from the surviving victim, his wife, Kimberly Reps.
Her medical situation was stabilized well enough for investigators to begin talking to her and trying to determine what had happened.
She described that she was going to sleep. She had woken up to a loud sound, to a white male suspect wearing all black and a black hat standing over her.
She told officers that she sat up in the room and had reached out towards this person, and that's when she felt pain in her shoulder.
Unfortunately, that's all Kimberly can remember. She says she didn't get a good look at the man who shot them.
It was a real brief conversation with the investigators because the medical staff needed to go in and evaluate her condition.
At this time, we knew we had to start looking for other evidence.
We're going around and knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, see if anybody saw anything, anybody heard anything.
The sheriff's office, in fairly short order, found a neighbor who had actually been outside around this time that the 911 call came in. He was exercising outside.
That neighbor explained to detectives that he had not seen anyone coming or going during the time in question.
Looking for possible leads, detectives turn to the couple's loved ones.
When we're interviewing friends and family, one of the questions we ask always is what kind of relationship the two victims have. We found out that they had met on an online dating app approximately a year, maybe 9 months prior, and only been dating for 3 months before they decided to move in together and get married.
Police also learn that not long before meeting Kim, Robert ended a relationship that had lasted for more than a decade.
Several members of the family had mentioned an ex-girlfriend, Lynn Roberts.
We learned that Robert and Lynn had a very long relationship that was ultimately up and down all the time.
They also corroborated the fact that the ex-girlfriend had gotten back into the picture regarding some personal properties, furniture, that type of stuff that the two had purchased together, that Miss Lynn had wanted her property back. The evidence was pointing towards Miss Roberts as being the one person who had a grudge against the two, both from a financial perspective and possibly from the fact that Kimberly had just recently married her ex-boyfriend.
Police consider the possibility that she was involved in Rob's murder.
I received a phone call from the Union County Sheriff's Department. They asked me on the phone what I knew about the shooting. And I'm like, I had no idea what they were speaking of. And eventually they told me that there had been an incident at Rob's home and that he was deceased. I couldn't talk. I couldn't stand. My daughter had to take the phone and speak to the officer and just let him know that they had to give me a few minutes. There's no way I could speak to them at that moment. Just disbelief. No way. Not Rob.
When she regains her composure, Lynn says she'd never do anything to hurt her ex-boyfriend.
During our interview with Miss Roberts, she described their relationship as a very loving relationship. He was very caring, very giving. The big issue they had between them was the alcohol.
We both enjoyed life, and we both enjoyed drinking, and we both sometimes could be outspoken, and we both sometimes would argue. But I wouldn't have hurt Rob intentionally for anything on the earth. My son and Robert loved one another. Like a father-son relationship, mostly. Truly. Were there times that Rob was aggressive? Verbally, yes. Physically, no. Sometimes he would get right on your face and scream at you. So it was a great relationship until it wasn't. Things got too hard and we needed to take a break.
While she admits she and Rob had their differences, she says she wasn't involved in the shooting. According to Lynn, she was with her son on the morning of the shooting.
We were able to establish through cell phone data that Lynn was the one that picked up her son in western North Carolina.
They were both very well alibied, very reliably alibied.
At the conclusion of our interview, she was no longer a suspect, nor her son a suspect in this situation.
Things are kind of running into dead ends. The leads are going stale. We're kind of running out of time at this point. So we really want to get back and talk with Kimberly at the hospital.
North Carolina police have ruled out their only two suspects in the shooting that killed Rob Reps and injured his wife, Kimberly. One day into their investigation, she remains hospitalized, And without her help, investigators know that finding the gunman will be a daunting task.
We knew that this crime was a crime of compassion. It was not a property crime. We really wanted to speak to Kim and get her side of several of the situations that were going on here.
That interview was delayed due to Kimberly having some sort of reaction or overdosing on opiates during her stay at the hospital.
I spent the night with her that night. I don't know what was in her system that may have been reacting with whatever they were giving her, but her blood pressure dropped dangerously low, and they were flushing her system to flush out whatever they had given her that was causing the overdose.
While they wait for Kimberly to recover, detectives return to Rob's loved ones to ask them about the newlyweds' marriage and any troubles they've been having.
One of the big questions we ask is, what kind of person is Robert Reps? He was described as a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
One of his close friends, in fact, told investigators that from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. was one of the nicest guys that you could ever be around, but that when he began drinking in the evenings, that he would become belligerent and not a nice guy.
The alcohol made his demeanor change, typically towards women in general, but in this situation, they were pretty volatile towards Kim. We had found out that she had slept over at other people's houses to get away from Robert.
Everyone that knew Rob described him as an alcoholic.
According to Rob's friends and family, his drinking problem wasn't the only thing that drove Kimberly away. Detectives learn that just before he died, Rob told Kimberly he was going on a trip with friends to a Caribbean island.
Rob went on a guy's trip twice a year, during the spring, then the fall, to St. Martin, the same place twice a year. He went with 4 friends. Women weren't allowed to go.
Kimberly did not like the St. Martin trips because they would gamble and they would drink and they would have a big time.
There were women involved, obviously. That's why they went, to drink and watch the ladies dance. One man even brought a woman back with him and eventually married her. When we were together, I understood that he wouldn't have a good time.
But it seems Kimberly found out what was really going on.
Our detectives were able to reach out to one of his friends that would go on the St. Martin trips with him and get an idea of what the trips had consisted of. On one particular incident, Kimberly had mentioned to friends and family that she had received a phone call from Robert's phone from a woman's voice. She tried to call Robert's phone back. No one would answer. She ended up having to call his friend to say, you know, something's going on with Robert. Can you check on Robert? The friend went next door to Robert's room and found a lady in there. We found out that Kimberly had confronted Robert about his relationship with a female in St. Martin, and he blew it off as nothing, that it was all a misunderstanding.
But Kimberly's friends say that she found evidence Rob was lying.
Kimberly had told a couple of folks that she was close to that she had found in a safe Rob's passport, and in the passport was a love letter written by someone who identified themselves as Mrs. Reps.
And that wasn't all she found.
Kimberly had told me about finding the receipt for a ring and a note, and she confronted him.
It seemed to corroborate what she already knew, which was that Rob had this relationship with another woman who lived in St. Martin.
At this point, I believe that she came to the conclusion that the stability, the love that she was hoping was there was not there.
To investigators, discovering that her newlywed husband is having an affair gives Kimberly plenty of motive to kill Rob. So they obtain a warrant to search the couple's home.
We were able to execute the search warrant and find this receipt in her purse inside the residence. In the description of the receipt, it was not matching the ring that she had received from Robert. A lot of this evidence was pointing towards Kimberly being our suspect in this crime.
Now we have a potential motive for the killing. They immediately decided that they needed to speak with her again whenever she was able to at the hospital.
I believe she had, in her mind, no other way out of the relationship other than to kill her husband and stage a home invasion.
Two days into the investigation of Rob Repp's murder, detectives have a new suspect, his new wife, Kimberly Reps. But they have no concrete evidence to disprove her story about an unidentified gunman.
In her statement, she had mentioned that she had sat up and reached out towards the offender, and that's when she felt the pain in her shoulder. That's when she indicated she had gotten shot.
To see if Kimberly's story stacks up, a forensics team examines the room where she says the shooting occurred.
When CSI processed the scene and used a dowel rod to show the trajectory of the bullet going through the mattress, through the box spring, and through the floor, that indicated a straight up and down trajectory of the bullet. If Miss Kimberly was sitting up in the bed, it would not have gone straight down. It would have gone more of a parallel to the floor trajectory, not perpendicular.
If it had gone through her shoulder the way that she had described it to us, then the bullet would have gone into the wall. So that did not match what she was telling us.
The ballistics report on the firearm found at the scene provides further clues.
The gun that was found in the house turned out to be the murder weapon. That was actually Rob Reps' gun. The ammunition in the gun and the shell casings that were found actually matched with a box of ammunition which was found in the house.
But it seemed odd that somebody would have potentially broken into this home and then shot Rob with his own firearm.
That was just very implausible.
The report also contains another strange finding.
After processing the firearm, it was noted that the casing was still in the gun.
A shell is typically ejected to the right and to the rear. It will sometimes stick and get stuck there. They call that a stovepipe. What that's indicative of, particularly with Glocks, is it's indicative that there was not a firm grip on the gun at the time that it was discharged.
So one of two things either happened. The gun didn't function fully, or she was the one that actually held the gun in her hand and, without a good solid grip, pulled the trigger. The trajectory of the gun, trajectory of the round, based off of the dowel rod, showed that it was a downward projection. For someone to shoot themselves in a downward projection, they would not be able to hold that gun in a good shooting grip.
Our theory was that she had shot herself in order to make it appear that she was also a victim of some sort of home invasion.
It's also possible Kim hadn't planned on either of them surviving that night.
Maybe she was trying to kill herself, trying to commit suicide.
In the attempt to shoot herself, to take her own life, she shot herself in the shoulder. So to justify the situation, to get help for herself, she called 911 and reported a home invasion.
What's happened, ma'am? I've been shot.
We needed Kimberly to answer questions that we had regarding the inconsistencies in the evidence. There were quite a few discrepancies between her story given at the hospital and the physical evidence in the case, and she needed to be confronted with those.
I told her sister that it was imperative that we spoke to her and asked could she bring her to the Union County Sheriff's Office for an interview before she had to take any medication. We wanted to make sure that she was able to speak to us in a lucid manner.
Coming up, detectives confront Kimberly.
I said, that is not what happened. And I showed her the ballistics.
And she offers up a shocking new portrait of Robert.
I believe he was evil and dark, and I believe she barely survived Rob Reps.
Two days after Rob Reps was found murdered, his wife Kimberly is emerging as the prime suspect.
When Kimberly showed up to the sheriff's office for the interview, she was willing to help out because at the point, she was still a victim in the situation. She didn't realize she was a suspect.
Investigators begin by asking Kimberly about her relationship with Rob.
When she was talking about Robert in the interview, she actually referred to him as a Prince Charming.
When the interview turns to the night of Rob's murder, Kimberly sticks to her original story.
By this time, the detectives had done enough investigating that they were already very suspicious of her and started confronting her about specific aspects of her story.
One of the things she kept reiterating on was she had sat up in the bed and she reached out with both hands, and I used the other detective as a role model. I said, please show me on this detective how you had done it. I told Kimberly, I said, that is not what happened. And I showed her the ballistics, I showed her the trajectory, and I could see in her that she was coming to the realization that her story was not gonna hold water. I tried my best to console her, to comfort her, and get her to understand that, you know, the truth is gonna come out. She was defensive, but she was understanding, and she admitted to shooting her husband and then shooting herself.
She claimed she shot him, and then she took the gun, and she was so upset by what she had done that she actually tried to kill herself. She said she aimed the gun at her own head and pulled the trigger, but she missed and shot herself in the shoulder. That was what she claimed.
When asked why she did it, Kimberly says there was more to it than simple jealousy.
Rob was sexually and psychologically assaulting Kimberly. The things that he would do to her, like making her undress and telling her she was fat and she was ugly. And he was very much manipulating and abusing Kim. He had a gun with a laser pointer on it, and he would follow her around the room doing target practice, he would call it.
Do this whole thing, and he laughs about it. He'd say, here, let me see if I got this target, that red target thing on his gun. And he let me get target practice.
You mean the red, like a laser beam type thing on the gun?
On his gun, not mine.
And we pointed at you and say stuff like that?
Just a little target practice. Here, just let me see if my aim's on. And I'm like, don't ever point a gun at anybody, ever.
There was also claims of sexual abuse that was going on between her and Robert, that Robert was making her do things that she did not want to do, that she didn't consent to do. She said that Robert was drunk almost every single night that they were married, and she just couldn't take it anymore. She specifically said that night that this happened, that all she wanted Robert to do was to hold her and to comfort her and to talk to her, and he wouldn't. He just told her, stop being dramatic, go to bed. and that really upset her. She said that he went to sleep and she stayed up all night long thinking about what he had said and all the things that he had done to her, and she had just had enough.
But we believed when Kimberly found the love letter and she found the engagement ring receipt, she had confirmation that Rob was not faithful to her. And she knew that Rob would not stop. That's when she snapped.
After the interview was completed and everything was laid out there on the table, we had a better understanding of what actually happened. We informed Kim that she was being charged with first-degree murder.
When I drove Kimberly to the Union County Sheriff's Department, nothing in my heart or mind would have ever believed that Kimberly would have done this. And when the detective came out and told me, Kimberly broke down and said that this is what happened. I was, of course, in shock and devastated by what had happened.
When we're dealing with especially a woman who is claiming prior domestic violence, we have to consider how a jury would look at that information. The jury may compromise because they feel sympathy or empathy toward the defendant. We were very concerned that that would happen here.
After Kimberly Reps is charged with the murder of her husband, Rob, prosecutors begin shoring up their case against her. They know her claims of abuse will likely become the core of her defense at trial.
The Kim that I knew was not a person that would do that unless it was self-defense. There's no way that she would have just taken somebody's life.
I was genuinely afraid of Rob.
When she said she had no other way out of the relationship, I believe she was implying that it was because of the physical and mental abuse that she was receiving. But based off of all our interviews with other family members and friends, that there was no evidence of physical abuse. We saw no reports in our 911 system in regards to Kim claiming Robert was assaulting her. She got transported to the hospital a couple of times for falling down, but she had vertigo.
The 911 call records didn't indicate any kind of domestic violence or violence at all at the home.
I know the signs of abuse. I do. And I never once seen it with Rob.
We take domestic violence very, very seriously. It is a real problem. It is a real issue. There are domestic violence abusers out there. There are victims. They're the people you work with, the people you've gone to school with, and it's real and it's tragic. We never found any evidence at any time in the entire investigation that would have supported the idea that Rob Reps had abused Kimberly Reps.
Rob's autopsy report provides further evidence that Kimberly wasn't being entirely truthful.
We were getting this whole, like, he's an alcoholic thing. And then we're simultaneously learning that his blood toxicology is 0. He has no alcohol in his system at the time of death.
Despite these inconsistencies, prosecutors are concerned that Kimberly's allegations might be enough to sway the jury.
If she had claimed that she suffered from diminished capacity, that's an affirmative defense in North Carolina based upon some sort of PTSD, she might be able to put some of these things in front of the jury in order to garner sympathy.
Instead of risking exoneration, the state decides to offer Kimberly a plea deal.
We discussed in detail this plea offer with Rob's family, specifically Rob's 2 adult daughters. When we discussed the risks of going to trial, Rob's family accepted that pleading to second-degree murder would be some semblance of justice for their family and would provide closure.
One of the factors that made them comfortable with the idea of a plea was the fact that she's gonna be old and gray when she gets out of prison.
On the eve of trial, just a week or so before, she pled to second-degree murder in lieu of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 20 to 25 years.
Do I believe that justice was served in my sister's case? Absolutely not. But it wasn't for me to decide. That should have been left up to a jury to decide.
He get dead, and you get 20 to 25 so she gets to have a life when she comes home. It's not justice, no. She should have spent the rest of her life in jail.
You have 2 suffering families here. You have Robert's family, who's suffering from the loss that was unnecessary, a loss that could have been prevented. And then you have the family of Kimberly, who's now having to live with this.
I believe he was evil and dark, and the darkness that she was enduring with all of the physical things that were happening to her at this time, she didn't stand a chance. Kimberly is a survivor, and I believe she barely survived Rob Reps.
What stands out most about this one is that someone who claimed to love another can put a bullet in his head in their marital bed. That takes a lot. This was her exit. Instead of just walking out the door, it's crazy.
She took away his children's father. He never got to meet most of his grandchildren. She took all that away from them. I think of him daily. I still have a pair of pants and a shirt that belonged to him. I've carried it around for the last 9 years. I probably always will.
The human mind possesses a remarkable capacity for beote, hot profound devotion, and devastating transformation. A duality that frequently manifests in the quiet sanctuaries of domestic life. Within the context of romantic relationships, the home is traditionally viewed as a place of safety and mutual support. Yet history reveals that it can also become the stage for tragedies born of hidden resentment and unresolved conflict. When analyzing why serious offenses occur within relationships with such unfortunate frequency, researchers and criminologists often point to the intense emotional stakes involved in intimate partnerships. Unlike interactions between strangers, domestic relationships are filled with shared vulnerabilities, deep dependencies, and complex histories. When trust is compromised, whether through suspected infidelity, emotional instability, or the slow erosion of mutual respect, the emotional reaction can be disproportionately severe. The primary motive in many such cases is not a desire for material gain, but rather a complex mixture of jealousy, perceived betrayal, the desire for control, and a desperate sense of having no other escape from a difficult situation. In many instances, individuals find themselves unable to navigate the end of a relationship through legal or peaceful means, choosing instead to engage in actions that permanently shatter the lives of everyone involved. In the assessment of these tragic events, investigators and forensic specialists rely on physical evidence that remains unaffected by human emotion or fabrication. Criminal plans, no matter how carefully devised, almost always leave behind subtle discrepancies that contradict the narrative presented by the perpetrator. The physical laws of the universe do not bend to accommodate a fabricated story, and it is these immutable truths of science that law enforcement officers utilize to uncover the reality of a crime scene. In cases where a perpetrator attempts to stage an event, such as pretending that an outside intruder committed the act, the investigators look closely at the details of entry and exit. A genuine home invasion typically involves signs of forced entry, disordered rooms, or the theft of valuable items left in plain view. When valuable belongings remain entirely untouched, and when there are no physical indications of enforced entry, the hypothesis of a random external threat quickly begins to weaken. Furthermore, the science of ballistics provides crucial clues that cannot be easily manipulated. The path of a projectile, the angle at which it enters a surface, and the behavior of a firearm during discharge all tell a precise mechanical story. When a suspect claims that an altercation occurred in a specific position, the trajectory of the bullet must align with that physical description. If the physical marks in the room show a completely different angle of travel, investigators can immediately recognize that the statement does not match the reality of the event. Similarly, the mechanical operation of a semi-automatic firearm can reveal details about how it was held. A malfunction where a spent cartridge fails to eject properly often suggests that the weapon was fired with an unstable or weak grip, a phenomenon well known to firearms experts. These technical details, when combined with logical analysis, allow the justice system to reconstruct the sequence of events with remarkable accuracy, demonstrating that even the most calculated attempts at deception contain the seeds of their own exposure. To prevent these devastating outcomes, society must focus on the critical life lessons that can be drawn from such histories. One of the most important lessons is the necessity of recognizing toxic relationship patterns and seeking help before situations escalate to a point of no return. Open communication, the willingness to seek professional counseling, and the courage to walk away from an unhealthy situation are vital tools for preserving peace and safety. It is crucial to understand that ending a marriage or a partnership, even when difficult and emotionally painful, is always an infinitely better option than allowing anger to govern one's actions. Additionally, addressing the issue of substance abuse, particularly the excessive consumption of alcohol, is of paramount importance. Alcohol often acts as a dangerous catalyst, distorting perception, lowering inhibitions, and transforming minor disagreements into intense confrontations. By fostering a culture that encourages emotional responsibility, healthy conflict resolution, and early intervention for addiction, communities can create a safer environment for everyone. From the perspective of law enforcement, catching perpetrators quickly and ensuring that justice is served requires a combination of modern science and traditional investigative diligence. Experience shows that securing the perimeter of a scene and immediately gathering statements from neighbors can rule out external suspects in the early hours of an investigation. Utilizing digital technology, such as analyzing cell phone location data and examining communications, allows detectives to establish clear timelines and verify alibis with high confidence. It is also essential for investigators to approach every situation with an open mind, refusing to accept the initial appearance of a scene without conducting a thorough forensic evaluation. By training officers in the subtle signs of staged environments and encouraging close collaboration between medical staff, ballistics experts, and detectives, the process of solving complex cases can be significantly accelerated. The story of the events that transpired in Union County, North Carolina, in the summer of the year 2016 serves as a profound illustration of these dynamics. The setting was a quiet residential street in the town of Matthews, a community known for its peaceful atmosphere and low rates of violent crime. In this neighborhood, residents enjoyed a tranquil lifestyle, making the events of July 12, 2016, especially shocking to the local population. Just before the arrival of dawn, at approximately 3 in the morning, the emergency dispatch system received a distressed telephone call from a residence on Parkstone Drive. The caller, identified as Miss Kimberly Reps, spoke in a frantic and trembling voice, reporting that she and her husband, Mr. Robert Reps, had been the victims of a sudden and violent attack by an unidentified intruder inside their home. She explained to the operator that an unknown man wearing dark clothing and a dark hat had entered their bedroom and discharged a firearm, injuring both of them. Upon receiving the urgent call, deputies from the Union County Sheriff's Office were immediately dispatched to the address. The first officers arrived on the scene within minutes, understanding the gravity of a reported active shooting. As they approached the residence, they observed that the area was exceptionally quiet, with no immediate signs of movement or disturbance in the surrounding neighborhood. The deputies proceeded, kept hot, great caution scanning the exterior of the house for any signs of a suspect who might still be in the vicinity. Finding the front door secure, they moved toward the rear of the home, where they discovered that the back door was slightly ajar. Crucially, as they examined the doorway, they noted that there were no visible signs of forced entry, such as broken glass, a damaged lock, or pry marks on the frame. Entering the dark residence, the deputies initiated a systematic search to secure the environment and locate the individuals in need of assistance. On the lower level of the home, they located Miss Kimberly Reps lying on the floor, suffering from a gunshot wound to her left shoulder. She was conscious and moaning in pain, repeating her statement that an intruder had entered the home and shot them before fleeing into the night. While some officers attended to her immediate medical needs and summoned paramedics, others proceeded up the stairs to search the upper level of the house and locate her husband, Mr. Robert Reps. As they ascended the staircase, they observed drops of blood along the steps and on the adjacent wall, which appeared to have been left as Kimberly made her way down the stairs to call for help. When the deputies entered the master bedroom on the second floor, they discovered a tragic scene. Mr. Robert Reps was lying on his back in the bed, his head resting on the pillow, suffering from a severe and life-threatening gunshot wound to his forehead. There was a significant amount of blood and physical evidence on the headboard directly behind him, indicating the force of the discharge. Although he was still alive, his breathing was extremely labored and shallow, a physiological state known as agonal breathing, which indicated that his brain was not receiving sufficient oxygen to sustain life. Recognizing the extreme urgency, the deputies cleared the way for the emergency medical services personnel, who had DUET arrived at the home. The medical team worked rapidly to stabilize both patients. Kimberly was prepared for transport to a local hospital, while Robert, due to the critical nature of his injury, was rushed to a nearby helipad to be flown to a major trauma center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Despite the valiant efforts of the medical specialists, Robert did not survive the journey and was pronounced deceased shortly after arriving at the helipad. Back at the residence on Parkstone Drive, The area was cordoned off with crime scene tape, and the forensic science unit began the meticulous process of documenting and gathering evidence. In the initial phase of the investigation, detectives faced a complex challenge. They had very little information about the couple, their history, or whether they had been specifically targeted. In any investigation of a reported home invasion, detectives must consider multiple possibilities, ranging from a random burglary gone wrong to a highly targeted assault. However, as the forensic team processed the interior of the home, they began to uncover details that did not align with a typical robbery. A variety of hat-go-hat value items, including computers, personal electronics, and other firearms, were lying in plain view throughout the living spaces, completely undisturbed. Nothing in the home had been ransacked, and no drawers had been pulled open, which is highly unusual for an intruder seeking valuables. The most significant piece of physical evidence found during the search of the bedroom was a semi-automatic handgun lying on the floor. Forensic technicians carefully marked and photographed the weapon before recovering it for testing. Upon closer inspection, investigators learned that the firearm actually belonged to Mr. Robert Reps himself. This discovery introduced a major question into the investigation. It seemed highly improbable that an outside intruder would enter a home, locate the personal firearm of the homeowner, use it to commit the crime, and then leave the weapon behind on the floor. Additionally, as the forensic team examined the bedding, they located a spent shell casing within the sheets and noted a bullet hole that passed directly through the mattress and the box spring into the floor beneath. To gain a clearer understanding of the circumstances, detectives sought to interview the neighbors living adjacent to the residence. They knocked on doors throughout the morning, seeking anyone who might have heard a gunshot or witnessed suspicious vehicles or individuals. Fortunately, they located a resident who had been outside exercising in the early morning hours, around the exact time the emergency call was placed. The neighbor informed the detectives that the neighborhood had been entirely quiet, and he had not observed any unfamiliar individuals or vehicles entering or leaving the area. This statement was a critical piece of information, as it cast further doubt on the theory of a fleeing suspect. While waiting for Kimberly to recover sufficiently to provide a detailed statement, detectives began to look into the background of the couple. They interviewed family members and close friends to understand the nature of the relationship between Robert and Kimberly. Through these conversations, they learned that the couple had met on an internet dating application approximately 9 months prior to the incident. After dating for only 3 months, they had made the decision to move in together and were married shortly thereafter. At the time of his passing, Robert was 54 years old and was highly regarded in his professional field. After experiencing a difficult childhood marked by the loss of his mother to illness when he was only 10 years old, Robert had developed a strong desire to be loved and accepted by those around him. He had channeled this empathy into a successful career in prosthetics, dedicating his working life to creating artificial limbs for individuals who had lost their mobility. His friends described him as a generous and fun-loving person who would go out of his way to help anyone in need. However, the investigation also revealed that Robert struggled vekep itahat, a significant dependency on alcohol. Friends and family members described a distinct change in his behavior when he consumed alcohol in the evenings. While he was exceptionally kind and professional during the day, his demeanor could become loud and argumentative after drinking. This volatile behavior had created significant tension in his previous relationships, including a 13-year relationship with a former partner named Miss Lynn Roberts, which had ended sometime before he met Kimberly. When detectives spoke with Roberts' family, several members mentioned Lynn Roberts as a person who might hold a grievance. They explained that Lynn had recently been in communication with Robert regarding the division of some personal property and furniture they had purchased together during their long relationship. Given the recent marriage of Robert to Kimberly, detectives considered whether financial disagreements or lingering resentment might have provided a motive. They contacted Lynn, who was shocked and devastated to learn of Robert's passing. She cooperated fully with the investigators, explaining that while their past relationship had been difficult at times due to alcohol, she still cared for him deeply and would never wish him harm. To verify her statement, detectives analyzed cell phone records and confirmed that Lynn was in a different part of the state with her son at the time of the shooting. This reliable alibi successfully eliminated her and her family members as suspects. With external leads beginning to diminish, the focus of the investigation returned to the hospital where Kimberly was receiving treatment. Detectives were eager to conduct a comprehensive interview with her to clarify the details of her initial statement. However, their efforts were temporarily delayed due to a medical complication. During her recovery, Kimberly experienced a severe adverse reaction to medication, causing her blood pressure to drop to dangerous levels and requiring the hospital staff to perform emergency procedures to stabilize her. Her sister, who remained by her side, watched in concern as medical professionals worked to flush the substances from her system. Once Kimberly was stable and alert, detectives arranged to speak with her. She recounted that on the night of the incident, she had been woken from her sleep by a loud noise and saw a white male standing over the bed, dressed in black. She claimed that she reached out toward the figure with both hands to defend herself, which was when she felt a sudden pain in her shoulder and realized she had been shot. She stated that she had not received a clear look at the face of the intruder due to the darkness of the room. While Kimberly was describing this sequence of events, the Forensic Science Unit was completing its analysis of the master bedroom. They utilized specialized tools, including dowel rods, to determine the exact trajectory of the bullet that had passed through the bed. The physical evidence revealed a perpendicular trajectory, meaning the bullet had traveled almost straight down through the mattress, the box, spring, and into the floor. This scientific finding directly contradicted Kimberly's narrative. If she had been sitting up in bed and reaching out toward an intruder, a projectile passing through her shoulder would have traveled at an angle more parallel to the floor, likely striking the wall behind the bed rather than traveling straight down into the floorboards. The physical evidence clearly indicated that the firearm had been discharged from a position directly above the shoulder, consistent with a self-inflicted wound, rather than an attack by a standing intruder. Furthermore, the mechanical condition of the firearm provided another vital clue. The spent shell casing had not been fully ejected from the chamber, a malfunction commonly referred to as a stovepipe. This type of blockage typically occurs when a semi-automatic handgun is fired without a firm, stable grip, causing the energy of the discharge to be absorbed by the movement of the hand rather than the mechanism of the gun. This finding supported the theory that the weapon had been held in an awkward, non-standard position, such as would occur if an individual were attempting to discharge the firearm into their own shoulder. As the physical evidence began to point toward Kimberly as the primary suspect, detectives sought to understand what could have driven her to commit such an act. They returned to her friends and family, asking more detailed questions about the state of the marriage. They discovered that the initial image of a perfect relationship had quickly deteriorated. In the months leading up to his passing, Robert had planned a trip with his friends to the island of St. Martin, a destination he visited twice a year. Kimberly had strongly opposed these trips, believing that they involved activities that were disrespectful to their marriage. Her suspicions were confirmed when she discovered a passport safe containing a letter written to Robert by another woman who referred to herself as the wife of Robert, along with a receipt for a jewelry purchase that did not match any item Kimberly had received. Armed with this information, detectives executed a search warrant at the residence on Parkstone Drive. Inside Kimberly's purse, they located the jewelry receipt, which confirmed that she had discovered the evidence of Robert's infidelity. This discovery provided a clear and compelling motive for the crime, suggesting that the initial story of a home invasion was a fabrication designed to conceal a tragic act of domestic violence. Detectives invited Kimberly to the sheriff's office for a formal interview. Still believing she was being viewed as a victim, she agreed to participate. During the conversation, the investigators asked her to demonstrate how she had reached out toward the intruder. When she did so, the lead detective gently confronted her with the scientific findings of the ballistics report, explaining that the trajectory of the bullet made her story physically impossible. Seeing that her narrative could no longer be supported by the facts, Kimberly broke down and admitted the truth. She confessed that she had shot her husband while he was sleeping. She explained that after committing the act, she was overwhelmed by distress and attempted to take her own life, but the weapon discharged into her shoulder instead. She then decided to stage the scene as a home invasion and called 911 for assistance. In her statement, she also alleged that she had been subjected to severe psychological and emotional abuse by Robert, claiming that he had controlled her, demeaned her appearance, and threatened her with firearms during their arguments. She described him as a highly manipulative individual whose behavior was deeply affected by his daily consumption of alcohol. While the defense would later attempt to use these allegations of abuse to garner sympathy, investigators could find no official records or police reports to support claims of physical violence in the home prior to that night. Neighbors and acquaintances of Robert expressed deep skepticism regarding the allegations, remembering him as a kind and non-violent man. Furthermore, the autopsy report revealed that Robert had no alcohol in his system at the time of his passing, which directly contradicted the claim that he had been drinking heavily on the night of the incident. Faced with the strength of the forensic evidence and the prospect of a trial for first-degree murder, which carried the possibility of a life sentence, Kimberly and her legal counsel chose to negotiate a plea agreement with the prosecution. After consulting with Robert's family, including his 2 adult daughters, the state offered a plea to the lesser charge of second-degree murder. This decision was made to spare the family the pain of a lengthy trial and to ensure a guaranteed period of incarceration. Just prior to the scheduled start of her trial, Kimberly entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to a term of 20 to 25 years in prison, bringing a somber conclusion to a case that had deeply affected the community. The resolution of the case left both families carrying a heavy burden of grief, For the loved ones of Robert Reps, the loss of a father, brother, and dedicated professional was a tragedy that could never be fully repaired. They remembered him for the many lives he had touched through his work in prosthetics and his generous spirit. For the family of Kimberly, the event was a devastating reminder of Hatove Kep. Unresolved personal conflict and emotional instability can destroy lives in an instant. The case stands as a powerful testament to the importance of seeking help in times of relationship distress, the value of scientific accuracy in the pursuit of justice, and the enduring need for empathy and understanding in a complex world. The pursuit of truth in the face of tragedy requires a delicate balance of deep empathy for the victims, a meticulous commitment to logical analysis, and an unwavering belief in the power of objective science. When a quiet neighborhood is suddenly disrupted by the sound of sirens and the frantic voice of an emergency call, the immediate human reaction is one of profound sorrow and concern. For the law enforcement officers who step into these situations, however, the emotional weight must be paired with an intense analytical focus. Every detail, from the position of a door to the trajectory of a modern firearm, holds a story. Human memory can be clouded by trauma, and human statements can be carefully constructed to mislead. But the physical laws of the universe do not bend for anyone. This is the story of a complex investigation that unfolded in the summer of 2016 in Union County, North Carolina, a case that began as a terrifying report of a home invasion and ended as a profound lesson in the psychological depths of human relationships and the meticulous nature of modern forensic science. It was just before dawn on July 12, 2016, when dispatchers in Charlotte, North Carolina, received a frantic 911 call. The caller, identifying herself as Kimberly Reps, delivered a terrifying message to the dispatcher stating that her husband, Robert Reps, was gone after being shot during an attack by an unidentified intruder in their home. The immediate priority of the emergency services was to dispatch deputies and paramedics to the scene, unsure of whether an active threat still existed within the household. Within minutes, deputies arrived at the residence, stepping into the early morning stillness. Vaikep, Atahat, heightened awareness. The silence of the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the chaotic scene described on the phone. Approaching the front door, officers found no immediate signs of disturbance, but as they navigated toward the back of the home, they noticed the rear door was slightly ajar. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, and no splintered wood. Stepping inside, the deputies began their sweep of the residence, quickly discovering Kimberly on the floor, suffering from a significant wound to her left shoulder. She was conscious but in visible distress, moaning for help and pointing toward the upper level of the home where her husband lay. While some officers tended to Kimberly, others moved cautiously up the stairs to secure the rest of the house. Along the stairway, they noted physical evidence of Kimberly's movement, specifically marks on the walls and steps that suggested she had pressed herself against them to maintain her balance while descending. Upon reaching the master bedroom on the second floor, the deputies were met with a tragic sight. Robert Reps was lying on the bed, having suffered a devastating and fatal head injury. He was still showing signs of agonal breathing, a physiological indicator that his body was desperately attempting to survive despite the severity of the wound. But his condition was critical. Paramedics rushed Bayote Hat individuals to the hospital, but Robert was ultimately pronounced deceased shortly after reaching the helipad, where a medical helicopter was waiting to transport him to a specialized facility in Charlotte. In the wake of this sudden loss, the community was left in shock, and detectives were faced with the monumental task of determining exactly what had transpired in the quiet hours of that summer morning. To understand the tragedy, investigators knew they had to understand the lives of the people involved. Robert Lene Reps was a man who had faced significant personal loss early in his life, which many close to him believed shaped his deep desire for affection and connection. Born on October 6, 1961, in Detroit, Michigan, Robert moved to Georgia with his family at a young age. His childhood was marked by the tragic loss of his mother to cancer when he was only 10 years old, an event that left a lasting impact on his emotional development. Friends and family remembered him as a warm, outgoing individual who possessed a natural ability to make people laugh and who deeply desired to be loved by everyone he met. Professionally, Robert found his calling in the field of prosthetics and orthotics, a career that allowed him to combine his technical skills with a genuine passion for helping others. By fabricating artificial limbs, he was able to restore mobility and independence to individuals who had experienced devastating physical losses. His work was highly rewarding, both emotionally and financially, but his personal life proved more difficult to stabilize. Robert had experienced 2 major long-term relationships before meeting Kimberly. In 1991, he married a nurse named Sue, with whom he had 2 daughters. Although the marriage eventually ended in divorce, they maintained a professional connection through their shared field. Following this, Robert entered a 13-year relationship with Lynn Roberts, a colleague who also worked in the orthotics and prosthetics field. Despite their deep bond, the relationship eventually deteriorated in part due to Robert's attention shifting toward other interests and the challenges associated with their lifestyle. After parting ways with Lynn, Robert turned to online dating, where he eventually met Kimberly Polk, a woman who had also experienced her share of marital struggles. Kimberly, a twin sister born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, had been married twice and was raising 2 children. Her second marriage had been particularly difficult and toxic, leaving her eager for a fresh start with someone who would treat her kep, kindness and respect. When Robert and Kimberly met, the connection was immediate and intense. Robert treated her with immense affection, making her feel incredibly special and valued. Within a mere 3 months of dating, the couple decided to move in together and get married, a decision that bypassed many of the typical stages of mutual vetting and relationship building. For Robert, who was in his 50s, the marriage seemed to represent the stability and partnership he had sought for decades. For Kimberly, it appeared to be an escape from a difficult past and an entry into a more secure, comfortable lifestyle. However, only 6 months into their marriage, this seemingly ideal union came to a sudden, violent end. As detectives began their work at the crime scene, they approached the situation with the open-minded skepticism required of professional investigators. In any reported home invasion, detectives look for specific physical indicators that support the victim's narrative. They look for signs of a forced entry, such as jimmied locks or broken windows. They look for evidence of ransacking, indicating that an intruder was searching for valuables. In this case, however, the physical reality of the home did not match the typical patterns of a burglary or a random robbery. Numerous high-value items, including personal computers, electronic equipment, and firearms, were left entirely undisturbed in plain view. Nothing had been ransacked, and there were no indications that anyone had searched the home for valuables. Furthermore, the back door, while ajar, showed absolutely no signs of physical force. This suggested that whoever entered the home either had a key, was let in by an occupant, or that the door had been left unlocked. The discovery of the firearm used in the incident added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Officers processing the master bedroom found a handgun on the floor, which was quickly identified as belonging to Robert himself. A spent casing was discovered in the bedding, and a bullet hole was located in the mattress. The idea that an intruder would break into a residence, locate the homeowner's personal firearm, use it to commit the crime, and then leave it behind on the floor was highly unusual and immediately raised questions among the seasoned detectives. While the forensic team worked to collect DNA samples and dust for fingerprints, investigators began to look closely at the personal lives of the couple to identify anyone who might have a motive to cause them harm. One of the first individuals to draw the attention of investigators was Robert's ex-girlfriend, Lynn Roberts. Given the long duration of their 13-year relationship and the relatively recent breakup, detectives wanted to ensure she was thoroughly vetted. Family members had mentioned that there had been some lingering disagreements between Robert and Lynn regarding the division of personal property and furniture they had purchased together. To a detective, even minor financial disputes or unresolved emotional lingering from a long-term relationship must be investigated as a potential source of conflict. When contacted by the sheriff's department, Lynn was devastated by the news of Robert's passing, expressing profound shock and disbelief. She described their past relationship as loving, but acknowledged that they had faced challenge, particularly regarding lifestyle choices. Crucially, investigators were able to utilize objective electronic evidence, specifically cell phone data and tower triangulation, to verify Lynn's location on the morning of the incident. The data conclusively showed that Lynn was in a completely different part of western North Carolina, picking up her son at the exact time the crime occurred. With their alibis fully verified, both Lynn and her son were quickly and definitively ruled out as suspects. With no other external suspects presenting themselves, detectives focused their attention back on the surviving witness, Kimberly. However, obtaining a detailed statement from her proved difficult due to her medical condition. Shortly after her admission to the hospital, Kimberly experienced a severe adverse medical reaction, which hospital staff attributed to a chemical imbalance or an accidental interaction involving pain medication. Her blood pressure dropped to dangerous levels, requiring immediate medical intervention to stabilize her system. This delay, while necessary for her health, created a critical window where investigators had to rely solely on the physical evidence within the home while waiting to conduct a comprehensive interview. During this period, detectives interviewed friends and family members to gain a deeper understanding of the dynamics within the Reps household. What they discovered was a stark contrast to the initial image of a perfect marriage. Several close associates described a significant shift in Robert's behavior during the evening hours. While he was known as an exceptionally kind, generous, and professional individual during the day, friends noted that his demeanor would alter significantly when he consumed alcohol in the evenings. Some described this behavioral shift as highly volatile, noting that he could become verbally confrontational and argumentative, particularly toward the women in his life. This volatility had reportedly created tension in the new marriage, to the point where Kimberly had occasionally sought refuge at the homes of friends to escape the uncomfortable environment. Furthermore, investigators uncovered a significant source of emotional conflict involving Robert S. travel habits. Twice a year, Robert would travel with a group of friends to the Caribbean island of St. Martin. These trips were strictly for his group of male friends, and spouses were not invited to attend. Kimberly had reportedly expressed intense dissatisfaction with these trips, suspecting that the activities on the island went beyond simple leisure. Her suspicions were seemingly confirmed when she reportedly intercepted a phone call on Robert S.'s phone from an unfamiliar female voice. Although Robert dismissed the incident as a simple misunderstanding, Kimberly's trust had been severely shaken. The emotional tension escalated further when Kimberly reportedly discovered Robert's passport inside a household safe. Along with the passport, she allegedly found a highly personal letter written by a woman in St. Martin who addressed herself using the surname Reps. In addition to the letter, Kimberly discovered a financial receipt for a high-value piece of jewelry, specifically a ring, the description of which did not match any jewelry that Robert had purchased for her. To the investigators, this discovery represented a powerful, immediate motive: the realization that her new husband, whom she had hoped would be her protector and partner, was potentially maintaining a secret life and relationship abroad, was a devastating emotional blow that could push an individual to a point of extreme desperation. With this potential motive in mind, detectives obtained a search warrant for the residence to look for the physical items Kimberly had mentioned to her friends. Inside the home, search teams located Kimberly's purse, and inside it, they discovered the exact jewelry receipt matching the description of the ring purchased for another woman. The physical presence of this receipt in her personal belongings confirmed that she had indeed discovered the evidence of Robert S.'s alleged infidelity, providing a clear psychological trigger for the events of that night. While the search of the home provided a compelling motive, it was the meticulous work of the forensic science team that ultimately dismantled the initial narrative of a home invasion. Crime scene. Investigators returned to the master bedroom to perform a detailed reconstruction of the shooting. Using physical trajectory rods, which are inserted through bullet holes to trace the exact path a projectile traveled, the team analyzed the bullet hole in the mattress and the box spring. The trajectory analysis revealed a startling physical truth. The path of the bullet was almost entirely vertical, traveling straight down through the mattress, the box spring, and into the floorboards below. This physical reality directly contradicted the statement Kimberly had provided to the medical staff and initial responders at the hospital. Kimberly had claimed that she was awakened by an intruder standing over the bed, and that she had sat up and reached out toward him, at which point she was shot in the left shoulder. If this scenario had occurred, the trajectory of the bullet passing through her shoulder and into the bed would have been at a distinct angle, running parallel or diagonal to the surface of the bed, and the projectile would have likely struck the headboard or the adjacent wall. The perpendicular, straight-down trajectory proved that the firearm had to have been positioned directly above the mattress, pointing straight down at the time of discharge, a physical impossibility if she had been sitting up and reaching toward an intruder. Additionally, the forensic analysis of the firearm itself revealed a critical detail. When the handgun was recovered from the floor, a spent casing was still wedged in the ejection port, a malfunction commonly referred to as a stovepipe jam. In modern semi-automatic pistols, a stovepipe jam typically occurs when the firearm is discharged without a firm, stable grip. The energy required to fully cycle the slide and eject the spent casing is partially absorbed by the movement of a loose wrist, causing the slide to close before the casing can be fully cleared. This forensic detail strongly suggested that the person who discharged the weapon did not have a standard, firm shooting grip. This finding aligned perfectly with the theory that the shooter had held the weapon at an awkward, self-directed angle, resulting in a weak grip that caused the firearm to malfunction after the shot was fired. Armed with this undeniable physical and forensic evidence, detectives requested that Kimberly come to the sheriff's office for a formal interview once she was medically cleared and fully coherent. On the day of the interview, Kimberly arrived accompanied by her twin sister, still presenting herself as a grieving victim of a horrific crime. The detectives began the interview in a gentle, professional manner, asking her to recount her relationship with Robert and the events of that fateful night. Kimberly initially maintained her narrative, describing Robert as her Prince Charming and reiterating the story of the dark-clad intruder standing over their bed. However, the detectives knew that the physical evidence left no room for fabrication. The lead investigator carefully walked her through the physical impossibility of her story, utilizing a colleague to physically demonstrate the physical positions required to achieve the vertical trajectory found in the mattress. He explained to her, with calm and steady professionalism, that the science of ballistics does not lie. The trajectory of the bullet and the malfunction of the firearm painted a clear, unyielding picture of a self-inflicted wound, designed to stage a crime scene rather than an attack by an external intruder. Faced with the undeniable physical proof, the constructed narrative began to collapse. Kimberly became emotional, realizing that the physical evidence had completely disproved her story. She ultimately admitted to discharging the firearm, confessing that she had shot her husband and then turned the weapon on herself in a state of extreme distress. She claimed that after shooting Robert, she was so overwhelmed by what she had done that she attempted to end her own life. But due to her unstable grip and the awkward angle, she missed her vital areas and suffered the shoulder wound instead. When asked about the reasons behind her actions, Kimberly painted a highly dark and distressing picture of her brief marriage to Robert. She claimed that behind closed doors, the relationship was marked by intense psychological and emotional pressure. She alleged that Robert would subject her to cruel comments about her appearance and would engage in highly controlling and intimidating behaviors, such as brandishing a firearm with a laser sight within the home. She further claimed that on the night of the incident, she had sought comfort and reassurance from him, but was dismissed and told to go to sleep. According to her account, she lay awake for hours, consumed by thoughts of his alleged infidelity, his impending trip to St. Martin, and the emotional difficulties she felt trapped in until she ultimately reached a breaking point. To ensure a fair and thorough investigation, detectives immediately sought to corroborate these claims of domestic abuse. They searched through years of emergency call logs, local police reports, and medical records. They found absolutely no records of domestic disputes, calls for service, or allegations of abuse involving the couple. While medical records showed that Kimberly had been treated for physical injuries from falls in the past, these were consistently documented as being related to a diagnosed medical condition of vertigo, with no indication of external physical force. Friends and family members of Robert also expressed profound disbelief at the allegations, stating that while he struggled with alcohol, they had never witnessed or heard of any physical violence. Additionally, the toxicology report from Robert S. autopsy revealed another significant detail. Despite the claims that he was heavily intoxicated on the night of the incident, his blood alcohol level at the time of his passing was 0. As the case moved toward the legal arena, prosecutors faced a complex challenge. While the forensic evidence proving Kimberly was the shooter was overwhelming, her defense team would undoubtedly utilize her claims of domestic abuse and psychological pressure to garner sympathy from a jury. In the state of North Carolina, claims of severe emotional distress or diminished capacity can sometimes lead a jury to compromise on a lesser charge, potentially resulting in an acquittal or a significantly reduced sentence. To avoid the unpredictability of a trial, and to spare Robert S. family, including his 2 adult daughters, the pain of a prolonged legal battle, the prosecution discussed the option of a plea agreement with the family. With the consent of Robert S. daughters, who sought a guaranteed measure of justice and closure, the state offered Kimberly a plea deal. Just a week before the scheduled trial, Kimberly Reps pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to a term of 20 to 25 years in the state penitentiary. This resolution ensured that she would spend a significant portion of her remaining years behind bars, providing a sense of security and justice for Robert's family, while avoiding the potential pitfalls of a highly emotional trial. The tragic case of Robert and Kimberly Reps offers profound insights into human behavior, the warning signs of deteriorating relationships, and the vital role of objective science in the criminal justice system. One of the most significant lessons to be drawn from this tragedy is the danger of rushing into major life commitments, such as marriage, without a thorough, long-term understanding of a partner's character, history, and coping mechanisms. Relationships that develop vekepite, hot extreme speed, often bypass the critical phases of conflict resolution and mutual understanding, leaving individuals ill-prepared to handle deep emotional challenges when they inevitably arise. Furthermore, this case underscores the vital importance of seeking professional resources and support when faced with relationship distress or alleged abuse. In any situation where an individual feels trapped, unsafe, or emotionally overwhelmed, there are numerous legal, professional, and community resources available to facilitate a safe exit. Choosing to escalate a conflict to physical violence not only destroys lives, but ensures that the perpetrator will face the full weight of the legal system, which is designed to uncover the truth regardless of how carefully a crime scene is staged. For law enforcement, the resolution of this case demonstrates the power of systematic, science-based investigation. By refusing to accept initial narratives at moot face value and instead relying on the objective physical laws of ballistics, trajectory, and modern technology, detectives were able to quickly narrow their focus, eliminate innocent suspects, and secure a confession. The rapid verification of alibis through digital data and the precise physical reconstruction of the crime scene serve as a model for how modern investigative forces can honor the truth, protect the innocent, and ensure that justice is served vekep. Eye-to-hat efficiency and absolute integrity. The human heart remains one of the most complex and unpredictable landscapes in existence, capable of profound devotion, and conversely, of devastating decisions when faced vekep, ite-hat, perceived betrayal. In the quiet neighborhoods of Union County, North Carolina, A community accustomed to peace and predictable daily routines, the sudden occurrence of violence within a domestic sanctuary sent shockwaves through the local population in the year 2016. This case serves as a solemn reminder that the veneer of marital bliss can sometimes shroud deep-seated conflicts, and that the search for truth requires the utmost dedication, scientific precision, and analytical rigor from law enforcement officials. By examining the tragic events surrounding the death of Robert Lene Reps and the subsequent investigation of his wife, Kimberly Reps, society can glean valuable insights into the psychological triggers of domestic escalation, the vital importance of objective forensic science, and the methods by which justice is ultimately served. The quiet hours before dawn on July 12, 2016, were interrupted when emergency dispatchers in Charlotte, North Carolina, received a highly distressed call. The person on the line was identified as Kimberly Reps, who reported that she and her husband, Robert, had just been the victims of a violent home invasion. She explained that an unknown male intruder, dressed entirely in dark clothing and wearing a dark hat, had entered their upstairs bedroom while they were asleep. According to her initial account, she awoke to a loud noise, confronted the intruder, and sustained a physical injury to her shoulder before the assailant fled the premises. Upon receiving this critical information, the emergency operators immediately dispatched deputies from the local sheriff office to the suburban residence. The first responding deputies arrived at the location within minutes, recognizing the urgency of a potential active threat. Approaching the home with caution, they observed no external signs of disturbance or forced entry. Upon investigating the perimeter, they discovered that the rear door of the house was slightly open. The deputies entered the home and located Kimberly on the floor, suffering from a physical wound to her left shoulder. She was highly emotional and urged the officers to check on her husband, who remained in the master bedroom on the upper floor of the residence. As the deputies ascended the stairs, they noted physical evidence in the form of organic marks on the wall and steps, which appeared to correspond with Kimberly holding on to the surfaces as she descended to seek help. Upon entering the master bedroom, the deputies located Robert Reps lying in the bed. He had sustained a severe and catastrophic injury to his upper body, specifically his head, which rendered him unresponsive but still struggling to breathe. The severity of the trauma was immediately apparent, with significant evidence of physical impact on the surrounding bedding and the headboard. Recognizing the critical nature of the situation, the deputies secured the area and cleared the way for emergency medical services to enter the home. Both individuals were transported to medical facilities, with Robert being moved to a helicopter transport in an effort to reach a trauma center in Charlotte. Despite these rapid medical efforts, Robert was pronounced deceased shortly after reaching the transport location. The loss of Robert Reps deeply affected his family, friends, and the wider community. Born on October 6, 1961, in Detroit, Michigan, Robert spent much of his youth in Georgia. His childhood was marked by a significant personal loss when his mother passed away due to illness when he was only 10 years old. This early tragedy left a lasting impression on him, instilling a deep desire to feel valued, loved, and connected to those around him. Robert was widely described by acquaintances as a warm, outgoing, and highly generous individual who possessed a unique ability to connect with people, even during brief encounters. Professionally, he dedicated his life to the field of orthotics and prosthetics, designing and fitting artificial limbs for patients who had lost mobility. This career allowed him to express his generous nature, as he frequently went beyond his professional obligations to assist his patients and friends. In his personal life, Robert sought a stable, enduring partnership. He was married in the year 1991 to a healthcare professional, and together they raised 2 daughters before eventually choosing to divorce. Later, he entered a long-term relationship with an associate named Lynn Roberts, with whom he shared a home and a professional connection for 13 years. Although that relationship eventually concluded due to personal differences and the strain of shared habits, the two maintained contact and a level of mutual respect. In the year 2015, Robert met Kimberly Polk through an online dating platform, and the two experienced a rapid courtship, culminating in marriage after only a few months of dating. To external observers, the marriage appeared to represent a positive new chapter for both individuals, as Robert frequently expressed deep affection for his new spouse. Kimberly Polk, a twin sister who grew up in Charlotte as one of several siblings, had also experienced past relationship challenges, including 2 previous marriages. While her first marriage ended amicably, her second marriage was characterized by friends and family as highly difficult and emotionally turbulent. When she began her relationship with Robert, her relatives hoped she had finally found a secure and supportive partnership. The rapid progression from their initial meeting to their marriage at the local courthouse suggested a strong mutual attachment. However, the tragic events of July 2016 revealed that the internal dynamics of the household were far more complex and fragile than they appeared. As the sheriff's office initiated the homicide investigation, detectives began to analyze the physical environment of the home. In any suspected home invasion, investigators look for specific indicators, such as evidence of forced entry, disturbed household items, or the removal of valuable possessions. In this instance, several high-value items, including electronic computers, personal effects, and other valuable equipment, remained in plain view and entirely undisturbed. There was no evidence that the residence had been searched or ransacked. This lack of disturbance strongly suggested to investigators that the incident was not a random burglary or a home invasion gone wrong, but rather a targeted action directed specifically at the occupants of the home. A critical piece of physical evidence was located on the floor of the bedroom. A handgun that was subsequently identified as belonging to Robert Reps. Additionally, crime scene investigators recovered a spent casing within the bedding and noted a physical trajectory through the mattress. The discovery of the victim's own firearm as the weapon used in the incident was highly unusual for a standard home invasion, raising immediate questions for the detectives. It seemed highly improbable that an unknown intruder would enter a residence, locate the homeowner's personal firearm, utilize it to commit the crime, and then leave it at the scene. To gather more information, detectives conducted neighborhood canvassing, speaking with residents who might have observed unusual activity during the early morning hours. They located a neighbor who had been outdoors exercising at the precise time the emergency call was placed. This witness reported that he had not seen any unfamiliar individuals or vehicles entering or leaving the immediate area, further casting doubt on the narrative of a fleeing intruder. In the initial hours of the investigation, detectives also explored the personal history of the victims to identify any individuals who might hold a grievance. Family members mentioned Lynn Roberts, the former long-term partner of Robert. Noting that there had been recent discussions regarding the division of shared property and furniture, investigators contacted Lynn, who was devastated to learn of the tragedy. Through thorough interviews and the analysis of mobile phone location data, detectives established that Lynn was in a different part of North Carolina with her son at the time of the incident. With a clear and verifiable alibi, Lynn and her son were quickly excluded as potential suspects, directing the focus of the investigation back to the evidence within the home. The effort to conduct a detailed interview with Kimberly Reps was initially delayed due to a medical event during her hospitalization. While receiving treatment for her shoulder injury, Kimberly experienced a severe drop in blood pressure and required medical intervention to stabilize her system. Family members noted that her condition appeared to be a reaction to substances within her system, which required healthcare providers to perform procedures to clear her system. Once her medical condition stabilized and she was determined to be fully coherent, detectives visited her to obtain a detailed account of the events. During this conversation, Kimberly reiterated her description of waking up to a loud noise and confronting a dark-clothed intruder. She stated that she had sat up in the bed and reached out with both hands toward the individual, at which point she experienced a sudden physical pain in her left shoulder. She explained that she did not obtain a clear view of the face of the assailant before he departed. While she was cooperative, the detectives recognized that her narrative began to conflict significantly with the emerging physical and scientific evidence from the crime scene. To evaluate the validity of her statement, forensic experts utilized trajectory analysis, using precise tools such as dowel rods to trace the path of the bullet through the bedroom furniture. The physical evidence revealed that the projectile had traveled in a highly perpendicular, downward path through the mattress, the box spring, and into the floor. If Kimberly had been sitting upright in the bed and reaching forward as she had described, the trajectory of a bullet passing through her shoulder would have been closer to a horizontal or parallel path relative to the floor, likely entering the adjacent wall, rather than traveling straight down into the floor. This spatial inconsistency suggested that the physical positioning of the body during the discharge of the firearm did not align with her verbal description. Furthermore, the mechanical condition of the recovered firearm provided additional clues. The weapon, a semi-automatic handgun, was found with a spent casing wedged in the ejection port, a condition commonly referred to as a stovepipe malfunction. This specific type of malfunction frequently occurs when a firearm is discharged without a sufficiently firm or stable grip, preventing the slide from fully cycling and properly ejecting the spent casing. In forensic experience, this is highly characteristic of an individual holding a weapon at an unusual angle, such as when attempting to inflict an injury upon themselves or when lacking the physical control typical of a trained shooter. The downward angle of the wound to the shoulder, combined with the mechanical malfunction of the handgun, led investigators to hypothesize that the injury sustained by Kimberly may have been self-inflicted in an attempt to create the appearance of a struggle with an external adversary. As detectives continued to interview friends and family, they uncovered additional details regarding the marital relationship. While Robert was described by many as a highly supportive and dedicated professional during daylight hours, acquaintances also noted that his behavior could alter significantly in the evenings, particularly when he consumed alcoholic beverages. This behavioral shift had created tension within the household, leading to verbal arguments and instances where Kimberly sought temporary lodging elsewhere to avoid conflict. Moreover, investigators learned of a significant source of friction involving travel. Robert frequently participated in group trips to the Caribbean island of St. Martin, excursions that did not include spouses. Kimberly had expressed substantial concern regarding these trips, suspecting that Robert was engaging in relationships with other individuals. Her concerns were heightened when she reportedly discovered a personal letter inside a home safe, written by an individual in St. Martin who addressed herself as his spouse, along with a receipt for a jewelry purchase that did not correspond to any items Kimberly had received. With this information, investigators obtained a search warrant for the residence and located the specific jewelry store receipt inside Kimberly's purse. The discovery of this document provided a tangible motive, suggesting that feelings of betrayal, anger, and the sudden realization of infidelity may have precipitated a severe domestic crisis. The accumulation of physical contradictions, scientific trajectory data, and a clear personal motive prompted detectives to invite Kimberly to the sheriff's office for a subsequent, more detailed interview. During this interview, detectives approached the conversation with professional objectivity, systematically presenting the forensic findings. They demonstrated how the physical path of the projectile through the mattress made her initial description of the event physically impossible. When confronted with the spatial reality of the trajectory and the mechanical details of the firearm malfunction, Kimberly's emotional demeanor shifted, and she acknowledged that her initial account of an external intruder was not accurate. She admitted to discharging the firearm, stating that she had acted out of extreme emotional distress and a sense of desperation. She asserted that she had subsequently turned the weapon upon herself in an attempt to end her own life, but had missed her vital areas, resulting in the shoulder injury. Kimberly claimed that her actions were the result of ongoing emotional, psychological, and domestic distress within the marriage. She described instances where she felt manipulated and intimidated, asserting that she felt trapped with no alternative method of resolving the situation. Following her confession, detectives informed Kimberly that she was being placed under arrest and charged with first-degree murder. The disclosure of her involvement was a source of profound shock to her family, who had believed her to be a victim of a random act of violence. The defense subsequently emphasized her claims of domestic distress as a central component of her legal representation, suggesting that her mental state had been severely compromised by the conditions of the relationship. In preparing the case for potential trial, the prosecution carefully evaluated the evidence and the potential reactions of a jury. While law enforcement found no historical records of emergency calls, physical interventions, or official reports supporting allegations of physical abuse within the home, prosecutors recognized that claims of emotional distress and domestic difficulty could introduce complexity during a trial. Additionally, the toxicology report from the medical examiner indicated that Robert had no alcohol present in his system at the time of his passing, directly contradicting assertions that he was highly intoxicated during the evening in question. To provide a resolution that ensured significant accountability while avoiding the emotional strain and unpredictability of a prolonged trial for the surviving family, the prosecution discussed a potential plea agreement with Robert's daughters. The family agreed that a plea to a lesser charge would secure justice and allow for a degree of closure. Consequently, Shortly before the scheduled trial, Kimberly Reps entered a plea of guilty to second-degree murder. She received a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years of confinement, ensuring she would spend a substantial portion of her life held accountable for her actions. This tragic case offers profound educational lessons for communities and individuals regarding the dynamics of domestic relationships and the absolute necessity of seeking constructive avenues for conflict resolution. It underscores the reality that structural issues within a relationship, such as mistrust, behavioral changes, and infidelity, must be addressed through open communication, professional counseling, or legal separation rather than allowed to escalate into physical confrontation. The choice to remain in a highly volatile environment can sometimes lead to a tragic loss of perspective, with devastating consequences for all parties involved. For law enforcement and forensic science, the resolution of this case highlights the critical importance of objective, physical evidence over subjective initial narratives. Meticulous scene documentation, the precise mapping of bullet trajectories, and the technical analysis of firearm mechanics are invaluable tools that allow investigators to reconstruct events with scientific certainty. By relying on empirical data rather than emotional assertions, justice systems can reliably distinguish between factual occurrences and staged events, ensuring that the truth is brought to light and the memory of the deceased is respected. Ultimately, the victory of justice in this case represents the diligent efforts of law enforcement professionals who refuse to accept surface appearances, choosing instead to follow the physical evidence wherever it may lead. On the morning of July 12, 2016, before the sun had fully risen over the quiet neighborhoods of Union County near Charlotte, North Carolina, a frantic call was received by the local emergency dispatchers. The voice on the other end of the line was filled. Vic hep hot, panic and distress, identifying herself as Kimberly Reps. She reported that a terrible event had occurred inside her home, claiming that an unknown intruder had entered her bedroom, shot her husband, and injured her as well. The emergency operator worked diligently to gather information, trying to understand what had happened, while simultaneously dispatching first responders and sheriff deputies to the residence. This call set in motion a complex and deeply sorrowful investigation that would eventually reveal a reality far different from the initial reports of a random home invasion. When the first deputy arrived at the scene, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The deputy waited briefly for another officer to arrive to ensure proper security before approaching the residence. They carefully surveyed the exterior of the house, looking for any signs of movement, disturbance, or suspicious individuals in the immediate vicinity. Finding nothing out of the ordinary outside, the officers moved toward the rear of the house. There, they discovered that the back door was slightly open. Curiously, there were no visible signs of forced entry, such as broken glass, a damaged frame, or pry marks on the lock. The deputies cautiously stepped inside the quiet home, searching for any threats while keeping an eye out for the residents. As they made their way through the lower level of the house, the deputies located Kimberly on the floor. She was bleeding from an injury to her left shoulder and was calling out for assistance. She explained to the deputies that she and her husband, Robert Reps, had been asleep in their upstairs bedroom when she was suddenly awakened by an intruder. She described a confrontation in which she reached out toward the individual, who then fired a weapon, wounding her. According to her account, the intruder then fled the scene. Kimberly told the officers that she had managed to get out of the bed and make her way downstairs to call for help, leaving her husband upstairs, unsure of his condition. Leaving paramedics to tend to Kimberly, the deputies proceeded to clear the upper level of the house, ensuring the scene was completely secure. On their way up the stairs, they noted physical evidence on the steps and the wall, which seemed to align with Kimberly pressing against them as she descended in search of help. Upon entering the master bedroom, the deputies found the victim, Robert Reece, lying in his bed. He had sustained a catastrophic and fatal injury to his head. Although he was still breathing when the deputies first found him, his respiration was highly labored and ineffective, a condition often associated with severe neurological trauma. Emergency medical personnel quickly prepared to transport both individuals to receive urgent medical attention. Robert was moved to a nearby helipad to be flown to a specialized medical center in Charlotte, but despite the best efforts of the medical teams, he was pronounced deceased shortly after arrival. With one victim deceased and another hospitalized, investigators from the Union County Sheriff Department began the meticulous process of uncovering what had truly transpired in the home. In the early stages of any such incident, detectives must remain entirely open-minded. They did not know the history of the couple, whether they had been specifically targeted, or if they were the unfortunate victims of a random act of violence. The community itself was deeply unsettled, as violent incidents of this nature were highly uncommon in this peaceful area of North Carolina. Investigators immediately secured the residence to allow forensic specialists to thoroughly document and collect physical evidence. As forensic specialists began their work inside the home, several unusual details quickly caught their attention. In a typical home invasion or robbery, perpetrators often search for valuable items, leaving behind a scene of disarray or ransacking. Yet, inside the Reece home, numerous high-value electronics, computers, and other valuable personal properties were left entirely undisturbed in plain view. There was no indication that anyone had searched the home for valuables. Furthermore, the absence of any forced entry at the points of ingress or egress cast doubt on the theory of a random intruder. It began to appear to the seasoned investigators that this was not a property crime gone wrong, but rather a deliberate and highly targeted act. A critical piece of physical evidence was discovered on the bedroom floor, a handgun that was quickly identified as belonging to Robert himself. In the bedding, investigators also located a discharged casing and a hole in the mattress. The discovery of the homeowner's own firearm as the apparent weapon used in the incident was highly unusual. It seemed very implausible that a random intruder would enter a home, locate the homeowner's personal firearm, use it to commit the act, and then leave it behind on the floor. This detail, combined with the lack of forced entry and the untouched valuables, shifted the focus of the investigation from an external threat to an internal conflict. While forensic teams continued to analyze the physical scene, detectives sought to understand the lives of the people involved. Robert Lene Reece, known to his friends and family as Rob, was born on October 6, 1961, in Detroit, Michigan. His family later relocated to Georgia, where he spent his youth. Rob's childhood was marked by a profound early loss, as his mother passed away from cancer when he was only 10 years old. Those close to him believed that losing his mother at such a young age left him with a deep, lifelong desire to be loved and accepted by everyone he met. He was described as a charismatic, outgoing, and generous individual who loved to make people laugh and who easily left a lasting impression on those he encountered. Professionally, Rob had found his calling in the field of orthotic and prosthetic services. He dedicated his career to designing and fitting artificial limbs for patients who had experienced life-altering losses. His colleagues and family noted that he took immense pride in his work, finding great satisfaction in helping his patients regain their mobility and independence. His generosity often extended beyond his professional duties, as he was known to go above and beyond for his friends, family, and patients alike. This successful career provided him with a highly comfortable living, yet his primary focus remained on finding a stable and loving partner with whom to share his life. Rob's personal life, however, was marked by a series of long and ultimately unsuccessful relationships. In 1991, he married a woman named Sue, with whom he had 2 daughters. Despite their shared lives and professional connections, the marriage eventually ended in divorce. Following this, Rob entered a long-term relationship with Lynn Roberts, with whom he lived for 13 years. Their partnership was close, and they worked together in the same professional field. However, after more than a decade, the relationship deteriorated. Lynn later explained to investigators that Rob had become increasingly attentive to another friend, leaving her feeling excluded, which eventually prompted her to seek a separation. Despite discussions about potentially reconciling, they remained apart, and Rob soon began looking for companionship elsewhere. That search led him to an online dating platform, where he met Kimberly Polk. Kimberly, a twin sister born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, grew up in a large family where financial resources were often scarce, but affection was plentiful. Like Rob, Kimberly had experienced difficult relationships in her past. She had been married twice and had 2 children. While her first marriage ended amicably, her second marriage was described by her family as highly toxic and manipulative. Her loved ones had spent considerable effort helping her transition out of that difficult period of her life. When she met Rob, the connection was immediate and intense. Rob made her feel deeply cherished, and after only 3 months of dating, they decided to move in together and shortly thereafter wed at the courthouse. At the time of the incident, the couple had been married for approximately 6 months. As detectives began interviewing friends, family members, and neighbors, they sought to build a complete picture of the newlyweds' life together. In any such investigation, understanding the dynamics of the household is essential. While looking into potential associates and past partners, detectives learned about Rob's long-term ex-girlfriend, Lynn Roberts. Several family members mentioned that there had been some lingering tensions regarding shared property and furniture that Lynn wished to retrieve. Given the financial and personal history, detectives considered the possibility that Lynn might have held a grievance. Detectives contacted Lynn Roberts, who was deeply shocked and devastated to learn of Rob's passing. She cooperated fully with the inquiry, describing Rob as a deeply caring but complex individual. She freely admitted that their relationship had faced significant challenges, particularly surrounding the use of alcohol. She explained that while they both enjoyed life, their discussions could sometimes become highly heated when alcohol was involved, describing occasional verbal altercations, but emphasizing that there was never any physical violence. Lynn provided investigators with a clear and verifiable account of her whereabouts on the morning of the shooting. Cell phone data and witness statements confirmed that she had been traveling to western North Carolina to pick up her son at the time of the incident. This solid alibi quickly satisfied detectives that neither Lynn nor her family members had any involvement in the tragedy, prompting them to look elsewhere for answers. With external leads yielding no results, investigators turned their attention back to the sole eyewitness, Kimberly. Because of her injuries, she was still receiving care at a local medical facility. Detectives hoped that as her condition stabilized, she would be able to provide a more detailed description of the intruder. However, their efforts to conduct a comprehensive interview were initially delayed. While hospitalized, Kimberly experienced a severe medical reaction to the therapeutic medications administered to her, which caused her blood pressure to drop dangerously low. Her sister stayed by her bedside during this difficult period, noting that medical professionals had to carefully manage her recovery to ensure her system was clear of any complicating substances. During this waiting period, detectives continued their interviews with those who knew the couple well. Discovering that the marriage was far from the perfect romance it appeared to be on the surface, friends of Rob described a significant change in his demeanor when he consumed alcohol. They explained that while he was incredibly kind and pleasant during the daytime hours, his personality could become highly argumentative and difficult in the evenings after he had been drinking. This behavioral shift had created substantial volatility within the household. Detectives learned that Kimberly had occasionally sought refuge at the homes of friends to escape these difficult evening confrontations. Furthermore, investigators uncovered a source of intense marital discord related to Rob's biannual trips to the island of St. Martin. For many years, Rob had traveled to the Caribbean with a group of close friends. Kimberly reportedly harbored deep resentment toward these excursions, believing that they involved activities that went beyond simple recreation. Her suspicions were seemingly confirmed when she reportedly discovered a love letter hidden in a safe within their home, written by a woman in St. Martin who referred to herself by Rob's last name. Additionally, Kimberly had discovered a receipt for a jewelry purchase in a safe, and the description of the item did not match any jewelry she had received from her husband. To the investigators, these discoveries suggested a powerful potential motive. A spouse discovering evidence of infidelity and hidden assets could experience a profound sense of betrayal and anger. Armed with this new perspective, detectives obtained a search warrant for the couple's residence. During the search, they located the jewelry receipt inside Kimberly's purse. The physical evidence was beginning to align with a theory of personal grievance rather than a random external attack. To test the validity of Kimberly's account of the home invasion, the forensic team conducted a highly detailed physical reconstruction of the bedroom. Kimberly had stated that she was sitting up in bed and reaching out toward the intruder when she was shot. Forensic specialists used a physical alignment tool, specifically a trajectory dowel rod, to trace the path the bullet had taken. The analysis revealed that the bullet had traveled in a highly vertical, perpendicular trajectory straight down through the mattress, through the box spring, and into the floorboards below. This scientific finding directly contradicted Kimberly's narrative. Had she been sitting up in bed and reaching out, a bullet passing through her shoulder from an external shooter standing over her would have traveled at a much more parallel or diagonal angle relative to the floor, likely lodging in the bedroom wall. The vertical trajectory was only consistent with a weapon being discharged from a position directly above the mattress, pointing straight down. Further examination of the firearm by ballistics experts revealed another critical detail. The cartridge casing from the discharged round was found lodged in the ejection port of the handgun, a malfunction commonly referred to as a stovepipe jam. This type of blockage typically occurs when a semi-automatic handgun is fired without a sufficiently firm, stable grip, a phenomenon known as limp wristing. In a standard shooting scenario involving an experienced or deliberate shooter, the weapon is held firmly, allowing the mechanism to cycle completely and eject the casing. A stovepipe jam is highly characteristic of a weapon being discharged with an unstable or awkward grip, which is common when an individual attempts to discharge a weapon pointing toward themselves or when firing from an awkward angle. These physical and scientific findings led investigators to construct a highly plausible alternative theory. They hypothesized that Kimberly had discharged the weapon, resulting in the fatal injury to her husband, and had subsequently discharged the weapon to inflict a non-fatal wound upon herself in order to simulate an attack by an intruder. It was also considered possible that in her distress, she had initially contemplated a more severe act of self-harm, but ultimately sustained the shoulder injury, subsequently fabricating the home invasion story to obtain emergency medical assistance and shield herself from suspicion. Equipped with this robust scientific data, detectives requested that Kimberly attend an interview at the sheriff's office once she was medically cleared and fully lucid. Kimberly agreed, still assuming she was being viewed primarily as a cooperating witness and victim. The interview began with detectives asking her to describe her marriage and her husband. She initially spoke highly of Rob, describing him in warm and positive terms. However, as the focus shifted to the events of that fateful morning, she repeated her story of the dark-clothed intruder. The detectives then introduced the physical and scientific evidence. They asked her to physically demonstrate, using one of the officers as a model, exactly how she had reached out toward the supposed intruder. They then explained the results of the trajectory analysis, demonstrating that the physical path of the bullet through the bed was entirely incompatible with her description of the event. They also discussed the mechanics of the firearm malfunction and the location of the casing. Faced with the undeniable physical and scientific facts, Kimberly's composure began to shift. Realizing that the fabricated home invasion narrative could not withstand scientific scrutiny, she became emotional. The interviewing detectives maintained a professional, calm, and empathetic demeanor, encouraging her to speak honestly about what had occurred. Kimberly then admitted that she had discharged the weapon, claiming that her actions were the result of a sudden and overwhelming emotional breaking point. She explained to the detectives that her relationship with Rob had become highly distressing. She alleged that behind closed doors, Rob subjected her to severe psychological and physical distress, asserting that he would frequently demean her appearance and manipulate her. She further claimed that he would occasionally brandish a firearm equipped with a laser sight, using it to intimidate her within their home. According to her account, on the night of the incident, Rob had been highly dismissive of her emotional distress, telling her to stop being dramatic before going to sleep. She stated that she lay awake for hours, overwhelmed by feelings of hopelessness and the discovery of his infidelity, before ultimately deciding to take his life. She claimed that she then turned the weapon on herself in a state of despair, but survived the attempt, which led her to call 911 and fabricate the story of the intruder. Following her formal statement and confession, Kimberly Reps was officially arrested and charged with first-degree murder, The news was a profound shock to her family, who had accompanied her to the sheriff's office, believing she was simply assisting with the inquiry. Her sister expressed deep sorrow, finding it incredibly difficult to reconcile the sister she knew with the actions she had committed, while noting that she believed Kimberly had been under immense unrecorded pressure within the marriage. As the legal process moved forward, prosecutors had to carefully evaluate how a jury might receive the case. In cases involving allegations of domestic discord, there is always a potential that a jury might experience sympathy for the defendant, potentially leading to a compromised verdict or a conviction on a lesser charge, even in the absence of documented prior reports. Investigators thoroughly reviewed all municipal records, including historic 911 call logs, and found no prior reports of domestic disputes or calls for assistance from the residents. Furthermore, medical records indicated that Kimberly's prior hospital visits, which her family had associated with physical incidents, were actually documented as being related to a pre-existing medical condition causing vertigo. Crucially, the autopsy report also provided evidence that contradicted some of Kimberly's assertions. Although she had described Rob as being highly intoxicated and volatile on the night of his death, the post-mortem toxicology analysis revealed that he had 0 alcohol in his system at the time of his passing. This objective scientific finding cast significant doubt on the claim that a state of acute intoxication had triggered a confrontation that night. Recognizing the complexities of a trial and wishing to spare Rob's daughters and family the emotional toll of a lengthy public proceeding, the prosecution discussed a potential resolution with the family. Leading to a lesser charge would guarantee a significant term of incarceration while providing immediate closure. Shortly before the scheduled trial, Kimberly Reps entered a plea of guilty to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to a term of 20 to 25 years in state prison. For Rob's family, the resolution brought a bittersweet sense of closure. While his daughters and loved ones expressed that no sentence could fully compensate for the loss of a father, brother, and friend, they accepted the outcome as a necessary step toward healing. They remembered Rob for his vibrant personality, his dedication to helping others regain their independence through his profession, and his enduring love for his family. Conversely, Kimberly's family remained deeply saddened, viewing the tragedy as the devastating collapse of a relationship that had promised hope but ended in profound despair. This case offers critical insights for both the community and law enforcement. For the public, it highlights the absolute necessity of seeking healthy, constructive avenues for resolving marital or relationship distress. The escalation of domestic conflict to violence is a profound tragedy that permanently impacts multiple families. It underscores the importance of utilizing community support systems, counseling, and legal separation as safe and structured means to exit difficult relationships, emphasizing that there is always a path forward that does not involve violence. For law enforcement, the case serves as a premier example of how objective, scientific forensic investigation is vital to uncovering the truth. The meticulous documentation of physical evidence, the use of trajectory analysis, and the understanding of firearm mechanics allowed investigators to quickly identify the inconsistencies in a fabricated narrative. By relying on facts rather than initial impressions, the investigating forces honored the memory of the deceased and ensured that justice was served cape to hot professionalism and integrity. The intricacies of human relationships often present a complex facade to the outside world. masking deep-seated conflicts, unspoken resentments, and hidden vulnerabilities. In many tragic instances, the public image of a perfect union, complete with mutual devotion and shared prosperity, is shattered in a single moment of extreme actions. When individuals find themselves trapped within the confines of a deteriorating partnership, the choice of how to resolve their distress becomes a critical juncture. While the vast majority of people choose paths of separation, therapy, or legal divorce, a small and highly misguided group attempts to solve their personal conflicts through irreversible actions, often compounding their mistake by trying to deceive the very systems designed to uncover the truth. The phenomenon of the staged crime scene represents one of the most intriguing challenges for modern law enforcement, as it pits the desperate, hurried calculations of a perpetrator against the objective, scientific, and logical methodologies of trained investigators. These cases occur with a troubling frequency because individuals often underestimate the power of physical evidence, believing that a simple story told vacep. Emotional desperation can overshadow the quiet, unyielding testimony of ballistics, trajectory, and biology. On July 12 in the year 2016, a serene neighborhood in Matthews, North Carolina, located in Union County, became the focal point of an intense criminal investigation. Matthews, typically known for its quiet streets and tight-knit community, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight when a frantic call was placed to the local 911 emergency dispatch center. The call came in just before dawn, around 3 o'clock in the morning, a time when most residents were asleep. The voice on the other end of the line was that of a woman, breathless and terrified, reporting that she and her husband had been the victims of a violent home invasion. She identified herself as Kimberly Reece and told the dispatcher that an unknown assailant had entered their residence and attacked them. The dispatcher, working quickly to coordinate a response, kept the caller on the line while directing sheriff deputies to the address on Parkstone Drive. The caller stated that she was bleeding from a wound to her shoulder and did not know the whereabouts or the condition of her husband, Robert Reece, other than that he was unresponsive in their upstairs bedroom. Upon arriving at the scene, the first responding deputies approached the home with extreme caution, uncertain if an armed intruder was still present within the structure. As they surveyed the perimeter of the house, they observed that the back door was slightly ajar. Interestingly, there were no broken windows, no damaged locks, and no physical signs of forced entry. This immediate observation, while seemingly minor at the moment, would later become a critical piece of the puzzle. The deputies entered the home and located Kimberly Reece on the floor, suffering from a gunshot wound to her left shoulder. She was moaning in pain, appearing weak and traumatized. She explained to the deputies that she had been awakened by a strange sound upstairs, only to find an intruder in her bedroom. She claimed she reached out to grab the individual and was shot in the shoulder. According to her narrative, the intruder then fled the scene, leaving several deputies to tend to the injured woman and guide the arriving emergency. Medical services personnel, other officers proceeded to clear the residence, moving systematically from room to room to ensure no threats remained. As they ascended the stairs, they noticed drops of blood along the steps and smeared on the wall, consistent with the injured woman making her way down to the first floor. When they reached the master bedroom on the second floor, they discovered a tragic sight. Robert Reece was lying on his back in the bed, suffering from a critical head injury. The scene was deeply distressing, with significant biological evidence present on the headboard of the bed, indicating the extreme nature of the act. Although Robert was still alive, his breathing was agonal, a physiological sign that his body was rapidly losing the ability to sustain life. Paramedics rushed to provide emergency care, and Robert was transported to a helicopter landing pad to be flown to a specialized medical facility in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tragically, despite the rapid response and the best efforts of the medical professionals, Robert was pronounced deceased upon reaching the helipad. To understand the tragedy fully, investigators knew they had to delve into the life and history of Robert Lene Reps. Born on October 6 in the year 1961 in Detroit, Michigan, Robert was the youngest of 3 siblings. His family relocated to the state of Georgia during his childhood. Robert experienced profound loss at a very young age when his mother passed away from cancer when he was only 10 years old. This loss had a lasting impact on his emotional development, leaving him with a deep-seated need to feel loved and accepted by those around him. Friends and family remembered Robert as a warm, outgoing, and exceptionally generous individual who had a natural ability to make people laugh. After completing his higher education, he channeled his desire to help others into a career as a prosthetist, a medical professional specializing in designing and fitting artificial limbs for individuals who had lost their arms or legs. His work allowed him to restore mobility and hope to countless patients, a profession that was both financially rewarding and deeply fulfilling to him personally. Mort High. Despite his professional success and his outer warmth, Robert struggled to find lasting stability in his personal life. In the year 1991, he married his first wife, Sue, a nurse with whom he shared 2 daughters. The demands of their respective medical careers and the pressures of daily life eventually led to their divorce. Sometime later, Robert entered into a long-term relationship with Lynn Roberts, a colleague who handled the billing for his practice. They lived together for 13 years, building a shared life that was characterized by deep affection, but also marked by periods of intense volatility, often exacerbated by the consumption of alcohol. Robert was described by those close to him as possessing a dual personality when under the influence of alcohol, shifting from a kind, generous caregiver during the day to an aggressive, loud individual in the evenings. Eventually, the strain became too great, and Robert and Lynn parted ways, though they remained in contact and discussed the possibility of reconciliation in the future. The search for a companion eventually led Robert to an online dating platform, where he met Kimberly Polk. Kimberly, a twin sister who had grown up in Charlotte, North Carolina, was described as intelligent, athletic, and friendly. Like Robert, she had experienced several failed relationships, including 2 previous marriages, one of which had ended under highly contentious and manipulative circumstances. When Robert and Kimberly connected, the chemistry was immediate. Robert made Kimberly feel cherished, calling her his angel and treating her with immense affection. The relationship progressed rapidly. Within 3 months of meeting, Kimberly moved into Robert's home, and shortly thereafter, the couple decided to marry at a local courthouse, bypassing a traditional ceremony in favor of a quick union. To the outside world, and to many of their friends, they appeared to be a happy, newlywed couple enjoying the comforts of their quiet home in Matthews. The investigation into the shooting began immediately under the direction of the Union County Sheriff Office, BIA. As crime scene investigators began processing the master bedroom, they quickly noticed several details that did not align with the narrative of a random home invasion or a robbery gone wrong. Within the home, several high-value items, including laptop computers, electronics, and even other firearms, were left in plain view and entirely undisturbed. Nothing in the home had been ransacked, and there was no evidence that anyone had searched the drawers or cabinets for valuables. This lack of theft strongly suggested that the incident was not a property crime, but rather a targeted act directed specifically at the occupants. Furthermore, the firearm utilized in the incident was located on the floor of the residence. Investigators identified the weapon as a handgun belonging to Robert himself. The idea that a random intruder would enter a home without a weapon, locate the homeowner's personal firearm, use it to commit a violent act, and then leave the weapon behind while ignoring all valuables was highly implausible and went against typical criminal behavioral patterns. In the initial hours of the case, investigators systematically explored all potential leads, which naturally included examining individuals from Robert S. past. Family members and friends mentioned his long-term ex-girlfriend, Lynn Roberts, noting that there had been recent disagreements regarding the division of shared property and furniture. The possibility of a grudge motivated by jealousy or financial disputes led deputies to contact Lynn. Upon receiving the news of Robert S. passing, Lynn was visibly devastated, experiencing a physical reaction of shock and grief that made it difficult for her to speak initially. When she recovered sufficiently to cooperate, she provided a detailed account of her whereabouts, explaining that she had been traveling to western North Carolina to pick up her son on the morning of the incident. Investigators utilized cellular telephone data to independently verify her location, which conclusively showed that she and her son were far from the scene of the crime at the time of the shooting. With their alibis fully confirmed, Lynn and her son were quickly ruled out as suspects, turning the focus of the investigation back to the home on Parkstone Drive. As the investigators ruled out external suspects, their attention turned increasingly toward Kimberly Reps, the sole surviving witness, Bon. While Kimberly remained hospitalized, detectives sought to conduct a detailed interview to gather more information about the alleged intruder. However, this interview was temporarily delayed due to a medical complication. During her hospital stay, Kimberly experienced a critical drop in her blood pressure, which medical personnel determined was caused by an adverse reaction or an overdose involving pain medications. Her sisters spent the night at her bedside as medical staff worked to flush her system and stabilize her condition. This medical event, while treated as an emergency, also raised questions for investigators regarding the presence of substances in her system and her overall emotional state. While waiting for Kimberly to recover, detectives continued to interview friends and family members, uncovering a much darker side to the seemingly perfect marriage. They learned that the newlyweds had been experiencing significant friction, primarily centered around Robert S.'s consumption of alcohol and his travel habits. Robert had a long-standing tradition of taking biannual trips with a group of male friends to the island of St. Martin. These trips, which were strictly limited to men, involved gambling, drinking, and adult entertainment. Kimberly strongly disliked these excursions and had recently uncovered evidence that suggested Robert was not entirely faithful during his travels. She had reportedly discovered a love letter in a personal safe, written by a woman who referred to herself as the second Mrs. Reps, as well as a purchase receipt for a jewelry item that did not match the ring Robert had given to Kimberly. This discovery of infidelity created a powerful motive of betrayal and anger, shattering the illusion of the devoted husband who had promised her stability and security. Armed with a potential motive, investigators focused on the physical evidence to see if it supported or refuted Kimberly's version of events. The forensic analysis of the master bedroom proved to be the turning point in the case. Kimberly had claimed that she was awakened by the intruder, sat up in bed, and reached out toward the individual with both hands, at which point she was shot in the shoulder. To test this claim, the crime scene investigation team utilized trajectory dowels to map the path of the bullet that had injured Kimberly. The analysis revealed that the bullet had traveled in a straight vertical downward path, passing through her shoulder, through the mattress, through the box spring, and into the floor. If Kimberly had been sitting up and reaching out, the trajectory of the bullet would have been parallel to the floor, and the projectile would have embedded itself in the wall rather than traveling straight down. This physical mismatch clearly indicated that the shooting did not occur as she had described.